Hey Carl, thanks so much for joining the show today.
Yeah, glad to be here.
For sure. And to get started, can you tell us a little bit about your journey in UX research?
Yeah, for sure. I have a psych background in general. I remember hearing about human factors research like right as I graduated undergrad and being like, oh, that's the thing I want to do. A lot of that leads directly into UX research. In grad school, I learned about the core, methodologies of like usability testing, interviews, surveys, all that stuff. So really wanted to go right into this field and luckily did. Yeah, I started out at Red Hat doing some dev tools work, like super technical stuff. That was pretty fun. A little bit more qualitative, but kind of got a taste for the quant and learned that I liked that. So then I did some consulting with UserZoom, now user testing, got really into usability benchmarking for a little bit. Really went more in on quant and was like, okay, I want to do this fully. And then went over to Meta and took my first formal quantitative UX research role. And after a couple of years there, ended up at Reddit, where I am a staff quantitative UX researcher, have fully kind of gone down that quant path. I still remember all the qual stuff. I still appreciate it. I occasionally do it, but I found what gave me the most energy and luckily have been able to really put my work in there and sharpen those skills. So yeah, it's been a fun journey and yeah, pretty happy with how things have turned out so far.
Nice, that's awesome. I'm a huge fan of Reddit. I've been using it for 16 years, so I'm super excited to have you on. Love that product.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, I've been a user for a while too, and I use my little snoo alien avatar in my interview deck, and I don't know if that helped, but it probably didn't hurt.
nice, smart. One of the things you talked a lot about in your journey is transitioning over to quant from just qualitative. And I think a lot of researchers are intimidated by quant and they lean on an analytics team for something like that. Like how do you encourage researchers to actually embrace that and become mixed methods?
Yeah, being the only quant person on my team right now, a lot of what I do is help other people lean more quant because I can't do everything. Like there are other surveys and analyses that need to be run. So yeah, it's really figuring out like, what of the quant domain do people need help with? Because some people might have really good instincts for like survey design, but maybe really unfamiliar with, statistical modeling, or maybe they do know some SQL, but again, they don't know how to like model the data once they get it. So it's kind of like figuring out of what's the stuff in the domain you might need to know, and then where do you need to sharpen more? Because you might already know a good amount about one area. And yeah, to encourage people, it's like, yeah, you really got to break it down into like, what do you need to know, and what are kind of the baby steps you take to start down that path. Like one thing I talk about with my team and I talk about with other folks is really how confidence intervals are just the most basic way you go from talking about these users to all of our users. And it's always helpful to know more of the theory behind those, but you can apply them pretty effectively without knowing all the theory with just following some good resources. So I try to point people at those resources that let them get up to speed for kind of like the bare minimum to do quant work.
Yeah, no, I love that. And then what about like the mix of just throughout a research project? I imagine you start with quant and say, okay, here's data indicating these users are doing something. How do you balance that with, all right, we need to go deep and do a study here, or let's actually just look at more numbers?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, because I do a lot of survey work, we often actually start out with qualitative research, I would say, where we kind of identify like what are the things we care about. Like, maybe we're learning about I don't know, let's say for like a healthcare product, which I did in some consulting, it'd be like what are the barriers to like signing up for a plan? You need to figure out before you start to quantify stuff, like what are the things you want to quantify. So I like to start with the qual to understand like these are the things we care about. Because if you try to prioritize or scale up your numbers before you know what you care about, you might get some numbers that point to like a clear priority, but you might be missing this other thing that would have actually overtaken that. So I really love to start with qual, especially when the space isn't like super, super well defined. But I think what you're talking about, starting with the quant, I think that happens a little bit more from like data analytics work, which I do, and I've been taking more on as well, kind of leaning into that data science realm just for fun. And yeah, when I think data science folks are really heavily in that quant world, so they have to kind of, come up with a best guess or a best reason for like what the user intent is. So I often recommend doing qual studies when we don't have a good sense of that intent. Like that's really the layer that UX research I think owns more than any other insight function is like, why are people intending to do this thing? Like data science knows what they're doing and how often and who's doing it, but yeah,
Mhm.
they don't know what that intent is. So if we don't have a clear sense of that, that's where I really feel like Qual helps us uncover what are the possible intents there.
Yeah, I think what I was referring to, and I think it really depends on the maturity of the organization you're at. I assume sound from the sound of it, I think Reddit's probably been doing this for a little bit. But I'm just thinking of those instances where a product manager or a CEO is like, "What are these numbers over here? Let's research that." And right, that's the impetus for research, where I think you have to have these guardrails around process and what you're going to research and why. So yeah, I think the maturity level of the org matters there. But I want to talk about something else, which I hear from a lot of researchers. I think there was there was layoffs in UX, there was layoffs in research, and they're getting pressure to conduct research faster and do more with less. And I think I think that's a good lesson, like provide value throughout the research process, have quick wins, give product direction quickly. But I also think there's certain studies and times where you can't rush proper research. So how do you recommend teams think about, okay, the product team wants this week. Sure, I can give them some insights, or no, they're trying to rush a 3 month study into a month, and that's not going to allow us time to provide significant results.
Yeah, yeah. This is, I think, kind of the core craft of UX research. I have this term for it, minimum viable rigor. Like it's sort of a line that is not, something you can necessarily add up on paper, but it's the point where if you go below that, you're kind of so unsure about the findings that it would maybe be better to not do the research at all. Because the thing is, when you do research, it's going to have more weight than if you don't do it. So like doing bad research is actually, I think many cases worse than doing none
Yeah.
because you're no longer saying, well, this is kind of an assumption, so let's take it with a grain of salt, where you're suddenly very confident about something that you shouldn't be that confident about. So yeah, I think this is a critical thing that all researchers have to care about. And yeah, it's really like an understanding of research design and like how much strength of evidence you have to whatever research question there is. So, there isn't like a clean calculation for it. I think Konstantin Pappas did an article after mine that kind of gives a scorecard for it, which is nice if you're not as familiar with it. But yeah, it's like, are you trying to like decide a whole new line of business? Like that's probably not something you should rush in a week. Is it like one, button might need to be shifted on a flow that not every user touches every day? Like, yeah, you could probably run that in a week with a little bit less rigor. So you just want to like match the potential severity if things go wrong with like how much effort you need there. Tactically, what I think this looks like is when a research team was like, well, we only have a week to do this based on what the product manager wants or designer. If you only have that week constraint, the answer is not to just do the research like and kind of try and deliver anything. It's more of a discussion of talking to the product manager of like, you want to know this, I can't tell you this, but I could give you these other answers in a week. So you have to kind of negotiate like,
Yeah.
here's what I can give you in a week. It's not that we won't do any research, we're just not going to give you maybe this level of confidence around it or like this clarity across all of these segments because we only have XYZ resources. So it's a negotiating process back and forth ultimately.
I love that. Yeah, it's definitely negotiating, compromising. And then the other thing you touched on, which I think is great, is it, the ROI, the impact ROI, like, wow, this is actually a new business line. No, let's not do that in a week. Let's dedicate the proper amount of time and effort to that. What about AI in research? What are you excited or terrified about?
I think I'm excited about a lot of stuff. I do a lot of coding because I'm a quant person. I think if you don't do a lot of coding, it's probably great too, because then you can do more of it. It
Yeah.
speeds my R code up, speeds my SQL code up quite a bit. I think that is really, really cool. You definitely use it to, organize information and, the kind of brief development phase, but I try not to lean on it too much for, going from 0 to 1. It's kind of like you need to have kind of 80% of the code or the idea there, and maybe it's that last little tweak that it kind of helps set stuff into place. Otherwise, it can kind of go off the rails. There's a lot of stuff that I'm not so sure about. One is like AI interviews. I
Yeah.
think based on what I've seen, a lot of the insights, like sense making, um, is is just very junior level. Like it's not wrong. It's just sort of bland. I think Jess Holbrook called it. we called it banal, this AI slop. And it's like, yeah, you can get a finding from it, but it's not going to be deep enough that anyone will care. And like,
Yeah.
it's not going to be novel enough that it will really change what the team is doing. So I think there's a trap there of handing off the sense making, and you get something that's like technically correct, but it's sort of like boring in the sense that it's not new. It doesn't actually push the needle for the team. So I think AI interviewing is something that is being pushed a lot. I think there's probably some kind of value there. I just worry about a lot of companies that are saying, hey, we've done this thing technically, but we have no sense of like, well, how does that actually work? Like, have we compared the insights to doing it the other way? Like, what is the actual difference? Like, what are the pitfalls and the benefits of it? So I really hope that we see more extensive publication around the actual quality of these methods. Because things like interviews, we know very well how they work. We know what they're good for. We know what they're bad for. AI interviewing is not the same thing, and I don't think we have a clear sense of where it works and where it doesn't work.
Great. Final question here. What advice do you have for new designers or junior designers or researchers entering the field today?
This is a tough one just because the market is kind of crazy right now. There was some really interesting research just published on LinkedIn that showed some Indeed data that we had this, big hiring spike, and we're actually not in a hiring rut as much as there's a lot of macroeconomic circumstances, but we've just sort of returned to a baseline. So there's like a lot of people that want to be here, and the role is still about as niche as it was 7 or 8 years ago. I think it's, if anything, it's grown. It's just there's so many people that want to do it now, which is great. But I think this is cliche, but it's what I think. I think you need to have like a passion for this. Like I think there is room in this field for people that like really, really want to be here. And I'm not saying like grind culture, like you don't need to be up on the weekends. Like you just
Yeah.
really have to give a shit. Like you need to really want to be good at this and have some passion for it. If it's something that you're not that interested in, like it might be tougher. But if you really love this stuff, then there's room for you here. Build out your network, let your curiosity bring you to talk to other people, learn from people. Yeah, I think it's that the curiosity makes for good UX people, but it also is, what leads to a lot of success in the field, just that drive to figure things out.
Absolutely. It's always easier if you want to do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Carl, where can people go to find your insights and follow you?
I'm probably most active on LinkedIn. The easiest way to find me is probably carljpearson.com is my website. I post a lot of stuff on my blog there when I have time about beginning quant stuff, advanced quant stuff, thoughts about the field in general. So yeah, LinkedIn or my website's probably the best place.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for joining the show today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.